Welcome to this published authors show. My name is Kenneth Muyingo, and with me I have a special guest that I will be interviewing. And first, I just want to mention, if you watch this interview and you would like to write a book yourself, to become an author and write your first book, there's a link with the interview for you to join the group, become an author and write your first book, to connect with like-minded people who are doing the same. And with that said, I would like to get into the interview by asking my guest to say hello to our viewers and listeners and to introduce himself.
Right, hello, my name is Syano, that's piano with an S, it's very glad to join your, I'm very happy to join your session. I am visiting the Netherlands, or well, hoping to move here permanently, and I have a background in academic philosophy, and but I've also branched into using philosophy to address problems of understanding in real-world problems, real-world issues. That is my very brief background, and so what else can I say? I'm both British and Kenyan, so I have those two identities. I love both, and I love football and dancing, and I'll leave it there for now.
Oh, quite a profile. And I think you left it out. It's Dr. Syano, right?
Correct. Yes.
That's so you have a PhD in philosophy.
Correct.
Wow. You are very modest, and you just you just leave that out. That's quite an achievement. And
well, it's a thank you. It's a well, if it's an achievement, but it's also a how do I put it? A reality check, because anyone who becomes an expert in anything, whether it's through a PhD or through their own professions or whatever, will also know that the more that you seek to know, the more you realize you don't actually know. So an achievement, well, thank you. I've got a degree, but that's as far as it is. I still know my place with regards to knowledge.
yeah. Wow, that's very impressive. So the more you know, the more you realize how much you don't know. That's quite impressive, Dr. Syano. Thank you so much. And so if somebody's watching this interview, so you mentioned you were a dancer,
Yes.
you are a philosopher, and I mean, it's like the whole spectrum of things, like sort of you figured out a way to balance left brain and right brain activity, if I could say it like that.
I hope I found the way of doing it. It works well for me so far, and yes, I'm a competitive dancer, and I also teach dancing. In fact, I've just started a small dancing project, and yes, I think it is a very important part of my life, and I haven't met anyone who at least didn't want to know how to dance. So
Yeah, that is true. It's just one of those things, and so you are a competitive dancer and also teaching others how to dance. That's very nice. I think we will be talking more after this interview about those dance classes.
sure, of course, of course.
And so
More
you
than happy
also published some books. So you were saying something?
No, sorry, carry on.
You have published some books. Can you tell us about
it? Yes, there are 3 books that there are 5 books I've published. 3 came out from a project, an enterprise I started about 4 years ago. It was a project where I tried to teach people how to. I wrote content on how to teach people to think independently in the mass media age. On certain topics, identity, sex, especially when it came to things like consent and body image, and also money, how to understand what it is, and everything from your own personal spending to how do you, when a politician makes you a promise to win your vote, you know, of course it's easy to say that I'll increase this and cancel that or whatever, but sometimes we need a little bit more of a framework to understand what these promises mean.
Yeah.
And that was the project, and I put much of it into literature.
Wow. So it's more focused on how to help people think independently.
Correct.
And
Yes. And
and
yeah, I was just about to say it was a project that I started along with a few of the students that I taught at the university, and it even ended up getting a contract from the Ministry of Education in the UK and also the University of Bristol. So
wow,
it was hopefully we did some good and made an impact on some people's lives.
indeed. It's thinking about the times that we're living in right now with the bombardment of all the information that comes through mainstream media, the news, and all sorts of information channels. Many people find themselves overwhelmed,
Yes.
and they sort of don't know what to even think. Knowing what you know with the journey that you've been on about this project on thinking independently, what can you share with them about knowing all ways they can start to think independently for themselves?
Fantastic. That's a very good question. The first thing I can say about thinking is that there's lots of techniques and mechanisms to thinking. Most of them are called logic, or you know how arguments work. But the most important thing about thinking is it's actually an attitude. It is and not so much a process, and it is our attitude towards. It is an attitude that reflects more of who we are, as well as what we want to know. And when we're encountering information, the attitude, the questions we ask people are things like, you know, what is your closest identity in terms of belief? Is it religious, political, ideological, whatever? And then we ask, you know, hard questions like, if you had a fundamental proof that your belief was wrong, would you change it?
Yeah.
Or if your view is a rival view, for example, if I'm a left-wing voter and I encountered a right-wing person, if they had good sides to their argument, would I accept it? Would I recognize it? Would I be able to accept some of the flaws in my own position?
Yeah.
And so when we're being bombarded by information, we are more than just, we're not just floating minds trying to know about the world. We are also targets of information. You know, people know who we are by our age, our race, our income, everything. And there's a reason why we receive information, and much of it will exploit our own preferences, sometimes even enforce them. The
Yeah.
important thing is to actually be aware of this. What am I being tempted to think, and what attitudes am I being presented? Have people already made evaluations for me about a certain person, a politician, or an event, whatever? And how am I aware of this? These are the first preliminary things I would get people to think about.
Wow. It's very profound indeed, Dr. Syano, because with the way the media is set up, I've had something mentioned about information bubbles,
Yes.
that two people can search the same thing, but based on what they are accustomed to searching, two people may get two different answers. And I think that then just like, I'm wondering what is true then? Because if two people can search for with the same question and get two different answers, but I like what you talk about, that thinking is an attitude about who we are and what is it that we are looking for.
Yes.
Yeah, and wow, that's this is inspiring. And when you think about being on this journey, so you said it was out of a project that you were working on. Was it
Yes.
an academic project, or was it a project that you was inspired personally to start?
It was a bit of both. We had just gone through the Brexit campaign, and I was completing my PhD and was still teaching. And I made a few predictions that turned out to be true. And when they did turn out to be true, my students came to me and said, "Well, what do we do? We're philosophers. We're meant to be custodians of truth."
Yeah,
And we thought about all sorts of things. Do we start a new party? Do we? But we're not really political. Do we? And then we said, well, our obligation is truth, because we're philosophers, and there was a lot of untruth and misguidance in information. So this is what we'll start with, and that's why we started. We ended up writing a system called the Think-Sit Validity Code, which is where we ended up filtering a news article for bias within half an hour.
yeah,
And we set up a platform, an alternative news platform. It's not running now because we ran out of funds. And so the tools we were using were academic. They came from straight out of analytic philosophy, especially logic,
yeah,
and which is basically, analytic philosophy is just a training of arguments. It's a game of how to argue, how you sift out truth, how you defeat, how you bring down theories, how to build up your own, and
yeah,
obviously your opponent will be doing the same thing to you. And we basically use these tools to say, right, let's take these tools to expose misguidance and mass information. Let's use our academic resources and
yeah,
apply it to a problem in the world. So it was a bit of both.
yeah. Wow. And and this was all inspired by Brexit, or it just happened to have come up around the time of the Brexit?
It was inspired. It was motivated by Brexit, because maybe not too much here, but in the UK, anyone will tell you the
Yeah,
narratives were just toxic.
yeah,
And we just said, well, we need to do something about information, how it is produced, why people who produce information, what incentive they have to tell us the truth. Obviously not a lot. They just need us to take a side or to think a certain way. And how do we counterbalance that? Because at the end of the day, the problem is making mistakes. If we are misguided, we make mistakes because
yeah.
we have false beliefs.
Indeed.
So it is more than just a passionate thing. It is, if society is in a far worse condition, if it is given information, especially persuasive information that's meant to engage our emotions, but it
Yeah,
causes people to make mistakes.
indeed. I heard that around the time, I don't know how true this is, but I heard that around the time of Brexit, that after the vote had been cast for Brexit, that the
Yes.
most searched item from the UK was what is the EU?
Yes.
I don't know how true that is. Do you have any information about that?
I don't know, actually. I don't know myself, but if anything, it exposes the position we were put in. We were asked to make basically a fundamental constitutional decision with very little knowledge and understanding.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, so yes, that doesn't surprise me.
yeah. And going back to philosophy, and that's a field that really interests me. If knowing what you know and study the journey you've been on, if somebody watches this interview and they are interested in philosophy, where would you advise them to start? Just a lay.
Where would you advise them to start? Wow. I started reading philosophy in the middle of my geography undergraduate, so my experience is I came across it by mistake. But if you are already interested in philosophy, where to start? I mean, obviously, I could recommend literature and authors, but I think the best place to start is yourself. Um, what are your questions? and why do you have them? They will almost always be personal. Socrates, who is meant to be the foundation of Western philosophy, was trying to solve problems of governance and of ethics in society.
Yeah.
And he saw mistakes that were being made. And that's how philosophy began. So an honest place to start will be with yourself. And then, your answers that you seek to investigate will lead you to they'll ask you more specific questions. Well, who has answered something about this? Who are the established people? I might be able to contribute to that, or any philosopher if you email someone, but the first person to ask is yourself.
Yeah. Wow. Yourself, the first place to start is yourself. You ask yourself some questions, and then you take it a step further to ask why you have these questions. Wow.
I think so. And it's not, and I'll add something to that.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a what is the meaning of life question.
Yeah.
Our part of our course in this enterprise was on sex and consent.
Yeah.
And I was in pastoral care at the university, where there were a lot of sexual assaults, and many people, when I would be in these meetings, they were usually they were more than disciplinary, where police got involved and so on.
Yeah.
Many of the perpetrators said things like, I did not understand that this other person wouldn't like this, or something like that. Okay.
Oh.
Or I do not I don't feel comfortable seeing myself like this, or there's obviously a body image, so on, start. And we answer these questions, so the question you have may not even necessarily be what is the meaning of life, and I don't know, what is moral, whatever. It could be something very practical, like why doesn't the world accept me with my skills and my passions? Why do I have problems with my parents? Why do I have it could be anything. It could be personal, and it doesn't have to be that big. I'll add that onto it.
Wow, that's good. So you mentioned Socrates as one of the founders of philosophy. Are there any books that you can recommend for someone who is interested in philosophy for them to start?
The first one, which most beginners in philosophy would encounter, is called The Republic. It's his most famous work. It is a dialogue about what is he asks the question, what is a morally good action, and what is a good state? And it is in dialogue form, so it is quite accessible. And The Republic, Plato's Republic. So it was written by Plato, but he was representing the views of Socrates, his mentor. So because it's in a dialogue form, and it's not as analytic in the sense, it's very accessible, and it shows you a bit about the philosophical method, which is understanding your opponent's view better than they do themselves. Arguing against yourself first before you, and most importantly, suspending all judgment before you make a decision. So it's a very humbling experience. It is, and like most philosophy is known for, you don't actually reach a decision because we just have limits as human beings. We won't ever know enough. But the Plato's Republic shows that we reach decisions and conclusions way too quickly. But it shows the process of what it is like to engage in a question that could be very simple. So yes, The Republic, it's a good one.
The Republic. Wow, that's I'll remember that. And any other one besides The Republic?
Here I am going to do some very shameful self-marketing, which is I think it is the most recent, the second most recent book on this issue. I called it The Contradictions of Our Time. It is a book I published a year and a half ago. and it tries to do something similar. And I'm trying to introduce what philosophy can do to the problems as a solution, or part of the solution to the problems of our time. And in that introduction, I do talk about what different theorists have done, what Thomas Kuhn did in showing that, for example, scientific revolutions aren't necessarily a guide to truth, but just different ways of thinking, or how Thomas Quine showed us that when we understand something, we know its fundamental principles, but these principles don't hold without recognizing the assumptions around them, and that there's no one tenet or principle or assumption that's more important than the other. And so that when you're given an item of news and you're told, oh, this is good, or Brexit is good or bad, or this happened to COVID or whatever, that framework of thinking, that's the aim of the book. It is to give people a framework, not too much ideas. And it spends half the time introducing this and then the rest of the time applying it, and to show contradictions like how wealth produces poverty, how our attempts to be good leads to us being evil, how democracy isn't always associated, its best practice isn't associated with Western countries. And once you're given this sort of independence, you can, the world will, all of a sudden you see the contradictions in real life and they come at you and you're empowered. So that's a bit of shameful marketing.
And the title is Contradictions of Our Time.
Yes.
I will be getting a copy of that myself as well.
Fantastic. Let me know what you think.
Most definitely. It's and on a personal level for yourself, when you think about books, like some people, when they think about reading, they say, I prefer to have like an audio book rather than an actual book. What's your preference?
I love audible books simply because of its pragmatism. I can put my headphones on, and when I'm walking to town or driving or whatever, I'm listening. I shouldn't admit that about the driving, too, honestly, but you get what I mean. Yeah. I can listen to what I need to listen to whilst doing other things, and I know other people are different. So I suppose it's what suits you.
Indeed. Well, very nice. And well, this is really inspiring. And where can people buy your books?
On Amazon.
On Amazon. Very nice. We'll put the links with the interviews so that people can access them. And if, like, with your experience and knowledge in philosophy, if somebody is sitting at home right now and they're like, 2020? No. This is not what I bargained for. I feel like I've bitten more than I can chew. What would you share with them, knowing what you know?
It is, well, the first thing is, don't be afraid, and we are not alone in time. History has seen ordeals that have put our ancestors, our brethren in time in similar positions. I may give a small, surprising admission. As much as I love philosophy, I actually think history is it is the supreme discipline to learn. I think we just get so much wisdom from it. If 2020 has been overwhelming, it's been overwhelming in many ways. Social, political, and global level, and obviously the impacts have been personal. People have lost jobs, maybe domestic problems, and so on. I suppose the first thing to say is that we are not alone, and others have been through this. And it would be interesting to take courage from people who are not only going through the same experience at the same time, but who have been through something similar in times before. I'll give you an example. During COVID, I found a lot of encouragement from Queen Elizabeth I of England in the 16th century. she was before she became queen, she was a prisoner, and she was a prisoner en route to execution. And she wrote a bit of literature in that is obviously very, very powerful, including lots of prayers and letters to her sister who wanted to kill her, and petitions to plead for her case. And she was confined in a prison. And I found myself reading her and finding a bit of, I'm not going to be, my life is not in danger as such in the ways hers was, but I felt, well, she's been through something and she had something very personal and deep to share, and it has put my own experience in its own perspective. It wasn't so much philosophy, it was companionship that I needed, companionship of experience. So if this world is confusing, if what happened has been overwhelming, has been destructive for you personally, there are far better people who can tell you much more motivational things about how to deal with it, how to heal yourself. And I think my part would be just to say that we have never been alone in this, really.
Wow, that's very well said. Thank you so much, Syano. And if somebody watches this interview and they feel like, I just really have to get in touch with Syano, what's the best way for them to contact you?
That is a very brilliant question, and you are the third person who asked me this in the last, because I'm no longer with my university, associated with my university, because I've left. I'm not in the UK anymore, so I don't have my university email address. My LinkedIn profile, I suppose, Dr. Syano Musyimi, and I'll have all my contact details there. You can send me a message. If you do wish, I am also on Facebook, and my face and profile in it, so you should be able to identify me if you put my name in. And I'd welcome a private message for whatever queries, suggestions, conversations that you may wish. As far as email addresses and phone numbers are concerned, I'll leave that as the conversations and dialogues progress.
Indeed. Oh, thank you so much. And so you mentioned about a project that you were working on earlier in the UK. And can you tell us about what you're currently working on right now?
Now I'm working on the fifth book, which is not the fifth book, the sixth book, which is a summary of the project. And it is more a justification of why we did what we did. So it's less of the tools and more of the story. And the title is actually called Resurrecting Socrates. And Resurrecting Socrates, a case for the Think Citizen, because our enterprise is called Think Citizen or Think Cit. So I have just finished that, and I'm looking now that I've moving to here in the Netherlands anyway. I'm looking for institutions who have not been so adversely affected that they would take this initiative and program, that they would want to partner with it. So I'm still writing, and I am still looking to deliver this cause, this what I'll call a service, and seeing how, in whose hands it may be best to partner with.
The resurrection of Socrates.
Yes.
Wow.
Or nice. Resurrecting Socrates.
Socrates. That's profound, Syano. This was very inspiring, and I'm so glad we made time for it. Is there anything else that you would like to share that we have not been able to address in the interview?
Oh, wow. All right, I'll keep this as brief as possible. I suppose I'll make one more comment about our beliefs and the relation between our beliefs and ourselves. And that is we are what we believe. It doesn't necessarily mean that we always choose what we believe. And at the same time, we are responsible for actions that come from our beliefs. So pay attention to what causes your beliefs, what you're watching, what you listen to, and there's a freedom, even in the mass information age, to understanding ourselves and understanding the world, that comes from just asking ourselves simple questions about what we believe and why we believe it. But most importantly, we are still humans. Feelings are more important than beliefs. You know, you can have all the right things. I mean, even political parties to, you know, someone you want to date, you know, can tick all the boxes. If you don't feel the right way, you know, it's not. I suppose just understanding what role belief has in your life, put it in its place, give it enough respect, and yes, I suppose that's the last thing to say.
Wow, thank you so much, Syano. I will sure be keeping in touch with you. This was very inspiring, and I'm so glad we made time for it.
Well, I'm very, very grateful for chatting to this, and yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome.